Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Scopes virtual workshop. My name is Liz Whitewolf, and I'm the Engagement and Program Manager for Scopes. I'm very happy to be here today with our guest presenter, Teresa Lampe. She will talk with you very soon, but I wanted to share just a few, just a little bit of information about our community of practice for those of you who aren't familiar with Scopes. How the day will go, or how our workshop will go, is Teresa will do her presentation, and we'll have questions, kind of a question and answer at the end. If you guys have questions as we go ahead and put them in the chat. I will interrupt Teresa if at a good spot to ask those questions, or we may just pause and wait until the very end to kind of do questions and answers. But again, thank you everyone for being here. Really excited to do this. All right, everyone can see my screen, hopefully. I'm on the correct slide now. So Scopes DF is a project that we started from Fab Foundation in early 2019. Scopes stands for Scaling a Community of Practice in Education for STEM through digital fabrication. So it's kind of a mouthful, but that's what the intention was in starting this project. Right now, from inception in February of 2019, we have over 1,000 community members that are registered on the site with over 250 standards aligned digital fabrication lessons that are open source and community contributed. So that is that's where the website stands right now. You can visit it right now. You can search lessons. You can add your own lessons, and we'll have some new features coming out later this month. A couple of resources we have on the site that you may or may not be aware of is we have a 33-page playbook, which describes the research done in our 2018 cohort, kind of right before we launched the public-facing side of the project. We had educators and makers embedded in a couple of STEM schools across the US, and the playbook reflects the learnings from that, that project. Another thing that we've worked with the community to develop is the Fab I Can statements, which are learning progression benchmarks. These are also accessible as you're uploading a lesson to the site. You can use these as standards. So the Fab I Can statements can kind of stand alone. You can actually download and print right from the website, or you can use them when you're building your lesson plans. A couple things that we're going to be doing in 2021 is we're going to be doing quarterly newsletters and also quarterly virtual events. We found last year when COVID hit and we started working on virtual events, it was a really good way to connect the community, and I think it gave voice to people in the community to share what they've been doing, especially during the pandemic times. So you'll have that to look forward to, quarterly newsletters, quarterly virtual events, and of course, other opportunities to participate. There are other ways to network with members of the community, and one is on Facebook, and then one is on our Fab Labs Live platform. For those of you who are not on Facebook or try not to be on Facebook, there are two ways to engage with us. So these we just launched in over the summer. We already have over 300 members on both of these networking sites combined. So check them out. It's really more of a casual way to get in touch with people or ask questions or share about projects. And please check it out. All right. One other way I'd love for getting people involved is to submit a lesson using digital fabrication tools or design tools that can be done virtually, either in a virtual classroom or at home. Teachers are really looking for ways to connect their students to these tools and technologies without actually being in the Fab Lab or the makerspace where the tool exists. So right now we have an unplugged lesson collection, and as people are uploading lessons and tagging them as unplugged, we're adding them to the collection so that there's kind of one repository where a teacher can go and look for lessons to do with their kids that don't involve everyone being in the makerspace or even everyone having access to the tools. Some of these lessons are about computer programming. Some of them are more along the design phase. Some of them are making stuff from home with supplies that you have at home. So they're like kind of all over the map as far as what the activities are. But the important thing is that they're offering ways for teachers to engage with their students without actually being in school. And now I'm going to turn it over to one of our community members, Teresa Lampe, who is going to talk to us about digital fabrication and portfolio assessment. Go ahead, Teresa. I will stop sharing.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Teresa Lampe. I am the STEM coordinator for Lamar County School District, which is in South Mississippi. Have a good deal of experience working with Maker, digital fabrication. I started teaching an engineering class back in 2012, and that was really my first introduction to making and using high-tech tools for students in classrooms, and really just fell in love with it and have gone crazy since then. But one of the things that happened is we had notebooks, and with those notebooks, it takes up a lot of room, and I really thought there had to be a better way of doing what we were doing. And I really felt like students weren't taking advantage of the idea of performance-based or portfolio assessments. And so that's really what I really want to talk to you about today is my experience with moving to a digital portfolio platform and my ideas about why is it important that we have portfolios for students. First of all, what is the definition of a portfolio? Because portfolios have been around for a long time. And portfolios are basically a collection. Most often it's a chronological collection of work by students. And it shows their development either in a specific project. Think the old lab notebooks we had way back in the day, or if you ever had a child who is in elementary school, oftentimes the teacher would collect this folder that had all of their information in it. It would pass from grade to grade to grade to show their progress. And then like third grade, we got these big, I mean, it was huge, this big folder of basically a portfolio of what your child had learned. And that's basically what a portfolio does. And we've used portfolios for a long time to show progress in work. There are actually two types of portfolios that you will find people talk about, showpiece portfolios or learning portfolios. Showpiece portfolios are when you just take out certain pieces. This is what you'll find among the art community, where a student will take all of their work and they'll critically look at their work and they'll pull out the pieces that show their best work or show a specific type of work. And this is also what you see when students show, like they do the science fair fold-out board where they show their best pieces of work in a lab experiment or a project they're working on. We used to do senior projects every year, and that fold-out board would have that senior's work over the course of a year and what they had done and their showpieces, basically. The other type of portfolio you'll find is a learning portfolio. Learning portfolios can be one or multiple projects. They are works in progress. They're not always the pretty showpiece portfolios, but this is really what I'm going to focus on today are the learning portfolios, because as a classroom teacher and as a maker educator who works with middle school students, we run 5 middle school after-school makerspaces in our district, and those students will keep a portfolio of their work over the course of the year. Now, their portfolios have multiple projects in them, And then at the end of the year, they'll pull pieces out to showpiece and have a showpiece portfolio. But this is their working, learning portfolio. In the classroom, most often that portfolio is associated with one particular project. And when I was a high school engineering teacher, that's what I had. We had a portfolio for the pinball project. We had a portfolio for robotics, and that's how it worked out. And then we've done different things along the way. And I'm just going to share with you my experiences and what I've learned in working with students and doing these portfolios. Common characteristics you're going to find on portfolios. It's a collection of work samples such as drawings, sketches, pictures, calculations. If they're working on something that needs calculation, you're going to find the calculations all contained in there. Reflections on work. I'm going to open this document. I am a huge proponent of reflections. And these links are in the, all of this is in a link that Liz is going to share with you. So you'll have access to any of this information. I am a huge proponent of projects. I've been doing projects for a long time with students. However, I found that if students don't really reflect on what they've learned or reflect on that project, you miss, number one, capturing the learning, and number two, they don't really stop and think about what they've learned or what they know now. And so in our makerspace, our students each day have to have daily reflective questions on whatever project. Our makerspaces, students fill out an interest inventory at the beginning of the school year. We pick out what they're most interested in, and then the facilitators work with them on learning the skills they need to do those projects that they're interested in. So some students do laser engraving, some students do pottery, we have sewing machines. It really all depends on what the student's interested in. But every student has to fill out this every day that they work on a project. So, what did you work on today? What problems did you have to solve? Because often we find that students never really think about the fact that they solved a problem, they just solve it. And as they get better and better at problem solving and critical thinking, the less and less they think about what they've actually done. And we're really trying to pull that out of them. What did you solve? What did you, what problem did you run into and then you fixed it? What worked, what didn't work? Because what didn't work sometimes is as important to the learning as what works. One thing you learned today, and then what part of the project are you working on tomorrow? Because we really want them to really reflect on what you've done today and plan for tomorrow mentally. And reflection is, to me, as important to the learning in projects as actually doing projects. So although I love project-based learning, I think it's great. I love maker education. But I think if we never ask students to reflect on what they've done, then we have missed capturing the learning, and we've missed actually having the students think about the learning that they're doing. So I'm just really big on reflection. The other common characteristic you're going to find in a learning portfolio is a teacher's feedback or a mentor's feedback, where that teacher or mentor actually looks at the portfolio of work that the student has currently, and they give them feedback. Have you thought about trying this? Or we need to see if we can find somebody to help you with this. That feedback portion is also very important. And as a facilitator of learning, if I never give my students feedback, number one, I don't really know what they're working on and what they're learning. I'm not giving them direction. I'm not helping them move forward. And that's really important to me, that I'm helping them move forward in what they're learning and moving forward in their project. I never want a student to stall out on a project. And I have had students come to me with a project and I'm going, I have no idea how to help you, but I have an electronics engineering teacher over here. I can get that person to help you. Or I have a university person who has access to something. So I'm really a facilitator. And if I don't want students to stall on a project, I either need to help them or I need to find somebody who can help them. So feedback to me is a very important part of portfolios. Why did we move to digital portfolios? I had notebooks and notebooks and notebooks in my classroom. And then over the year, you know, you save them for a couple of years and kids would forget to take them with them. They would contact me several years down the road and say, do you remember when I did this project? Do you still have my stuff? And I'm you know, if it's 5, 6 years down the road, I don't have your work. It's been put, you know, away because we cycle out every 5 years. Because I just don't have room in my classroom to keep all of that. And so digital portfolios was a way to have portability for students so that they take it with them. And it's in a digital format, so it's not a notebook they left in the classroom and then need it later on down the road. The other reason I really like the digital portfolios is this thing right here called a video. And so I have an example here, if I can get this to play. Oops, and it's not going to play. I'm so sorry. This is actual video of a project we do. It's a Christmas tree light, and they program with an Arduino the flashing of the lights. And in the picture, you can see that the lights, there's a couple of lights that are on, but in the video, you can actually see what the flashing pattern is. And so you're capturing more of what they've done than just even a picture can provide, because we can print out pictures and put it in a paper and pencil portfolio, but a video really tells me, you know, what's happening. And then the other thing was, for me, it was ease of feedback. I could sit on my computer at night and I could give the kids feedback on their portfolio. I didn't have to lug this big book home like I did before. So I really like the digital portfolios, the ease of feedback portion of that. Why do I think it's important to do portfolios? It provides evidence of actual learning experiences. For me, we were an engineering program. We had standards. We had a checklist of standards. The students had to meet the standards. And portfolios were a way for me to say, okay, I can check that standard off. They learned that. And so it's a way of performance-based assessment. It documents the design process, critical thinking, problem-solving skills. In a way, I don't think there is any other way really to document these type of skills unless you have a portfolio of work for a student to document that. Because there's no standardized test that's going to show what the student has learned on that. It just demonstrates growth and progress towards long-range goals. I love this part of portfolios because when I would teach robotics, the first little section, I'm just trying to get the students to write a simple program, make your robot go forward. And by the end of the course, they're making robots that do windshield wipers, or they run an obstacle course, or they do really high-end task. And so if I look back at the portfolio, or even if the student looks back at the portfolio, they can see how far they have come over the course of a semester or a year of work. And it's really a great way to do that. The other thing I find is that students will take responsibility for their own learning when they know they have to do that portfolio. Now, I will tell you that in the beginning, I have to train students. So it does take me about 3 weeks to really and I'm going to show you an activity we're going to do and it's one of my first activities, and I'll show you how I really get them started. You have to train students to use a portfolio and to begin to keep a portfolio. It is not something that is automatic. A lot of students have never had any experience with portfolios. So I really, in the beginning, I'm very specific about what I want. And I grade that as much on your format as everything else. And then later on, as they get better and better, it's automatic. They log in every day. They're answering their questions every day. It becomes an automatic part of their classroom instruction. And then that way they take responsibility for themselves. And the other part is the self-reflection and self-evaluation. Because I think it's really, really important for us to start teaching students to really self-reflect on what they're doing. Projects are great, and I love projects, but if you never really self-reflect or do a self-evaluation on what you've learned from doing that project, you've lost some learning there. As you can tell, I'm really big on reflection. The other thing that I find important for especially digital portfolios, students take these with them. It's in a digital format. They can show it to their teachers, their parents. They can pull parts of it out, again, because we do learning portfolios. They pull parts of it out to show prospective employers what they can do, show admission counselors what they can do. I actually had a student one time take parts of their portfolio in a college admissions interview. And the admissions counselor was really impressed with the fact that the student had actually done a project on their own, and they had proof that they had done the project in the form of a portfolio. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a short activity, and the full version of this activity is actually on the link. And this is a really easy activity. This is one of the first things I do with students is and most of you are probably familiar with this one, try to get students to build the tallest freestanding tower possible from paper. So I always do this on my introductory day of class because number one, covering all the handbook stuff and all the boring administrative stuff, it gets old. So I have to have something to get them up and get them out and around. So I always do this first day. And number two is this is where I first get them started in organization skills. And I'll show you on the next couple of slides what I have them do. So you're going to need paper, tape, scissors, ruler. Just use whatever you've got in front of you at your desk or wherever you are. And the rules are you have to construct a tower out of paper and tape. If you don't have tape, try some glue or something to hold it together. If you don't have glue, you can use a stapler. I've had people do staple tapes, staple towers. Each tower must be freestanding, meaning it's not attached to or laying against any surface, floor, wall, etc. It must stand for 10 seconds, and then you're going to measure it from the base to the highest vertical point. And if it's curved or sagged, you can't straighten it. You have to measure it as it's standing. So I am going to give you 10 minutes, and you're going to sketch a picture of your tower. Now, what I have students do is they sketch the picture of their tower, and they can't start building until I approve their tower, because that's part of the engineering world, is that regardless of your sketch or your drawings, somebody has to approve your tower before you ever build it. So I always make them do that. And you'll find that in the full-blown version of this is that part, the teacher signature. You're not going to have to do that. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to sketch and build your tower. So, and Liz, you may have to help me with timing here if I run over. But I think we do have enough with 10 minutes to give them time to build.
Are we also taking a picture of our sketch? Or
yes.
Is that next? Am I jumping ahead?
That's okay. We're going to do it next.
Okay.
That's okay. That's okay. We are going to take pictures of our towers. So if you want to go ahead and take pictures, that's good. Any questions before I start? Liz, you may have to tell me if anybody sends in a chat question.
I do have some questions while people are making their drawings. There have been two questions about how you give feedback with these digital portfolios. Is there an app or a program, or how do you give feedback besides writing it?
Okay, so
we get into this later on.
We're going to get into this a little bit later on because I'm going to show them what I use, but I use Google. And because I use Google, there's always that comment feature in Google that I do comments all over their portfolios. So that would be that.
And the other question had to do with the interest inventory. It would be nice to see that.
Okay. I'll go pull that up while they're building towers. I'll go pull that up, and then I'll share a link with you, Liz.
Okay.
So you can send that to everybody, because I don't mind sharing that at all. So I'm going to give you some time, go sketch and build, and we're going to come back together in just probably about 8 minutes. I'll be honest with you, in the classroom setting, we actually give the students about 20 minutes, but I shortened it for the time. If you give students more than 20 minutes, they spend too much time just playing around. So I find that giving them a time limit really holds their feet to the fire and gets them just kind of really thinking. So anybody want to share? Show me your tower.
Hello, I can share.
Okay, great.
How are you?
Good.
I actually enjoy a lot doing this exercise. But I don't know how to, it's standing. I don't know how to shape. I mean,
Yeah, that looks great.
stay there.
And it stands freely?
Yeah.
Good, good.
I don't know.
That's really good for 10 minutes.
Kind
Good
of,
folding.
kind of see.
Your folding technique's really good. Anybody else?
We have another one here. Let's see if I can move the camera.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Okay.
Oh my God.
That's really good.
That is very
It's
good.
standing. It's standing.
Showing off. Showing off.
Sorry that I cannot.
That's good.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to share a picture of your tower?
Well, someone did share one in the chat as a JPEG.
Okay. Is there any way we can show that on the screen or not?
Sorry, let me share my screen. I've got it open now.
Okay.
There we go.
It's actually a good idea. I never thought about having pictures submitted.
Yeah, so this one.
Oh, there you go. There you go. All right. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Thank all of you for participating. As I say, when I do this in the classroom, I spend some time before we actually have them build. I give them about 20 minutes to build. I give them 10 minutes or so, depending on how hard they're working, to actually work on their drawings, their initial drawings. So this is where it really the rubber meets the road, as far as this is first day of class. This is when I am really getting them started. And so you'll see that I'm very specific about how they do this. Now, we're going to talk about different ways you can do a portfolio. I have found the best way with students that we have found that works for us is Google. And we have students create Google slides. Now, you can find out there several resources where you have Google slide templates for projects. And that's great if you're working with elementary students and you want them to have a more specific format. I find that elementary students, we have to give them more guidance. For middle school and high schoolers, we have them create their own Google slides because I want them to be creative and I don't want them to use the template. I have them put specific information in there, but I don't have them do a specific template. So that's probably the difference. If you're working with more elementary students, you're going to have to give them more guidance as in a template. Middle and high schoolers are usually very familiar with Google Slides. And so they can rock and roll. They can put all kind of cool backgrounds on there and cool fonts and all those kind of things, and I'll let them do that. What I am very specific about is, what is your format? So I tell them to create a new Google Slide document, and I have them name the document. This becomes very important as you're going along and you're trying to give feedback, is that they have their name in their title. So I lay it out for them. This is a part of their training to use portfolios. You have first name, underscore last name, underscore paper, underscore tower. And this is the format I follow all the way. It's robotics, same format. If it's pinball machine, same format. Everything is the same format, so that when I'm digging through trying to give feedback, it makes my job so much easier. And then first slide should be paper tower and your name. Take a picture of your tower, and you're going to put that tower in the second slide. And then you're going to measure your tower and record that measurement. That's going to be under the picture on the second slide. And then you scan your original design. And of course, for them, that's going to have the teacher's signature. That's going to be your third slide. And then on the fourth slide, you're going to answer some questions. So always there's going to be reflection questions. This is at the beginning. We haven't really worked through a lot of the reflection. So I just ask simple reflection questions on this one. And then there's another question I ask sometimes about, because I really want them to learn to start collaborating. And so I'll ask them, so look at all the other towers in the classroom, and what would you use from some of the other towers on your next tower if you were to rebuild it? Because in engineering, you want them to think through iteration. And part of the problem with teaching engineering skills to students is the fact that we don't often get to go through that iteration process multiple times for lack of time in a classroom setting. The iteration process sometimes gets lost, but I do want them to think in terms of, if you were going to do this again, what would you do? And what ideas would you steal, from other people? And we allow that in our classroom. If somebody else has a good idea and you want to rebuild yours and you love the way they folded their columns, you're going to maybe want to use that in your next one. And so we do some talking through that with them. But and this is very specific, but as students get better and better and better with portfolios, then I just stick to those daily reflection questions. And then they have ownership of, am I going to put a video in? Am I going to, put a picture in? And, and it just differs from different things. And I'm going to show you some of what I've done with students in these next few slides. But you'll see that you can't just throw it out to the kids about doing portfolios. You really have to train them. You have to scaffold the learning. Unless you have students who are familiar with digital portfolios or portfolio assessment, you really have to scaffold the learning. And that's just part of what I do. When I assess portfolios, it becomes a big part of it because I do have to give grades. I'm not always in a makerspace, like our after-school makerspaces. We don't have to give grades. But sometimes we give them a rubric so that they'll know exactly, or checklist to tell them exactly what we're expecting from them. In a classroom situation, I'm going to give them a rubric or a checklist, and that checklist or rubric is going to have grade assignments. You get so many points for each thing, and that's because I'm having to give a grade for the class. So it just depends on what kind of situation you're working within, that you can do. And you're going to want to track their performance. Even in our makerspace environment, we're tracking performance, because if we find a student that is really falling behind and they're not getting a lot done, this is where we go to them and we take their portfolio and we sit down with them and the portfolio and say, okay, why are you stuck here? You haven't really progressed, and figure out where the problem is. Because if you never show progression, you're never going to go. And the point is to get better. And we want them to get better. And most of our students on the interest inventory, they end up doing 4 or 5 projects a year. And you don't want them to get stuck on one project and not get to do some of the other projects that they're interested in. And give feedback. That's how I know what feedback to give. So I'm going to show you a rubric. if it will open. This is the pinball project. If you've ever seen the pinball project on the Scopes DF website, the pinball project is where students build a cardboard pinball machine. And like I say, this project, if you're interested in this project, it's a great one. It's on the Scopes DF website. And I graded them. And so there's all kinds of things I'm grading them on. The design, I give them specific points for design. My students have to learn how to use SolidWorks CAD. And so they have to show that they've done their model of their flippers and their buttons in SolidWorks. And then I give them points for aesthetics. And all these other things are things that they're required to have on their pinball machine. They're supposed to have a launch mechanism. Their flipper mechanism needs to easily pivot. They have to have obstacles, at least one must be 3D printed. And you may not need to have this specific of a rubric or checklist. It just depends on what your situation is and what you're looking for. And I'm going to show you in a few minutes a portfolio for one of my students' pinball projects. So you'll get to see what that kind of looks like from the student side. But that's just, it just depends on your situation, what your rubric would look like. I do more of a checklist. If it's something that there's scaled 1 through 4, say, of different attainment of knowledge, a rubric works better than a checklist. It just depends on what you're looking for in your grading or your assessment. There are some limitations that I found with portfolios. Not all teachers are going to see the value of a portfolio. We live in the United States in such an era of teach to the test and standardized testing that sometimes I have a really hard time selling portfolios to teachers in my district. I will tell you though, as an engineering teacher, I did have end of course exams that were standardized exams at the end of the year. I covered all of my material with project-based learning, and I always had, my students always scored in the top 5 schools in our entire state on how well they did on the standardized test. So I know that standardized tests can, doing project-based learning, you can teach students what they need to learn on it to do well on a standardized test. My students always did well, and I didn't teach with standardized tests. Quantity, and this is, students do this sometimes. They think quantity is sometimes, you know, proof that they've done well. And quantity is not as important as quality of work in my book, because I'm looking for them to do a good job at whatever project they're doing, not just throw it together, because you don't learn a lot from just throwing a bunch of things together. Worthwhile activities can be time consuming to develop and to facilitate. And this is, I run into this all the time. It's because I have to play this game of, I want them to do project-based learning. I want it to be done well. I want them to spend time on a portfolio, but it takes classroom time to do all of those things. And so I play this game of, you know, how far can I push it and still have enough time to cover everything I need to cover in a semester or a year course. So just to be aware of that. It can be very difficult to assess on very specific objectives. With time, if you use this a lot, you begin to get better and better at learning ways to build this in. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be in one of the portfolios that I show you, but I've even had students, if there were certain definitions in a unit that they had to know that I knew they were going to have on their standardized test, I would do this thing where I'd say, okay, you're going to have a slide in your portfolio, and it's going to have to address, like one of them I know was force. It's going to have to address force. You're going to have to find me some pictures of force or put in a video of what force looks like, put in the definition. So it's still kind of a part of their portfolio, but I'm really like, it's more of a, you know, you got to learn the definition of force. So you can build in specific objectives sometimes that way. And assigning a single score to a portfolio sometimes doesn't really address the depth of learning that students attain with portfolio assessment. because to a certain degree, when I'm scoring, especially in the beginning, I'm as much scoring the organization as I am their learning. So I really have to work hard to make sure that score addresses how deep their learning is. And sometimes that's hard to do.
Teresa, we have almost 10
Oh, yeah.
minutes left.
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
oh, go that fast. All right, options for digital portfolios. I'll talk fast. Websites or blogs, such as Google Sites, which was what I first tried to do, and you're going to see one of those. Electronic notebooks are really good. I'm a OneNote user. Some other people have used LiveBinder. But for students, we use Google Slides in our makerspace, and in the classroom, we use Google Slides. Just because what happens is with a slide, you have this much information, and you can start training students. You have one slide per day. You need to have pictures of what you did. You need to have videos of what you did. You need to address your reflective questions, and you do that in one slide. And for organization purposes, it seems to work well for students. So I wanted to show you a couple of different ones. This is a Google site that one of my students did. It was for the pinball project. When it pulls up. All right, this one is in Google Slides. This is robotics portfolio. And all of a sudden my internet's doing crazy things. I like Google Slides because and you'll see, I was going to point this out. This is back before I learned to teach kids to use a scanner, and they would take pictures of their hand-drawn sketches, and then I am like, oh, that's not really that great, and it doesn't address it. So later on, after I did this, I taught kids how to use a flatbed scanner, and I have them scan in their work, so it was a much better representation of their things. And this is a robotics. And they just show their stuff. They have questions they have to answer. And then they had videos. They had to do videos of what they did. I love the video part because it really shows more of student learning than what you can see in a typical portfolio. I'm going to try to quickly go to these. This was a final project portfolio. The student actually presented his project at a maker fair. And the personal projects you very much have, they just work, at this point, they're doing day-to-day work, and they're doing reflective questions each day. And this student actually did a hand, and it shows he was doing this on SolidWorks, so he shows all his models, 3D printing, that was one of the mess ups, and his work in progress as he's going along and building his hand, you know, and then sketches and things like that. Oops, went too far, sorry. They don't always have to be, their final projects don't always have to be high tech. This particular student really was interested in how to build an airplane, a glider. And so I had him work with another teacher who is an RC enthusiast, and he built a glider that it's made to be very, very light, and it goes in the air. And so that was a really good one. And this is what my original idea, if you decide to use Google Sites, the thing about Google Sites is you'll see this student has her pinball portfolio, and it shows all her work and all of her pictures for her pinball portfolio, her SolidWorks drawings, and things. But you can also, the reason I like Sites is because you can actually have different pages. So she had her portfolio for her robotics and her portfolio for her pinball project, and it's all in the same location. So if you have students who can work well with Sites, it's great, but I had trouble getting kids to think in terms of, you know, it's organization became an issue with Sites. So that's why I abandoned it for Google Slides. So just some other tips and tricks. If you do decide to use Google, which I use, which I find there's so many things about it. It's easy to comment on students, to give them feedback. So it's common, you know, to all students in our district. So that's why I use Google. I did teach them how to use a scanner because taking pictures of drawings is not as good as actually scanning the drawing in. And then the other thing is for Google, if you do use Google, make sure the students put a file folder out there that they share with you, and they drop all their videos and pictures in that file folder that's already shared. If they don't, then they have to share each video or share each picture. And so that becomes kind of a tough task for students. So that's just a tip that I learned the hard way that I wanted to share with you. And do realize that, I mean, you can tell it took me a while to work out how to do this in the best possible way, and what works for you may not quite work for it may not work for you, or you may want to tweak it or whatever. But I hope this gives you a starting point on using digital portfolios. And trying to leave some time for questions, but there's my contact information if anybody wants to email me, and I will stick my email also in the chat box. So Liz, I'm gonna turn it back over to you.
Yeah,
For questions.
I have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
One is, what age ranges were the portfolios that you just shared for us, specifically using Google Sites versus Google Slides?
Google Sites was high schoolers. They were junior and seniors in high school. But even they struggled with the Google Sites. So that's why I went back to doing the Google Slides. And with our middle schoolers, we definitely use Google Slides. We only use Google Slides with them.
And then the other question is, how much time do you allocate for the projects and also for documenting them for the portfolios?
So my classes, because we're on a block schedule, we're an hour and a half a day. And so it's kind of, I would make them use like the last 15 to 20 minutes to really get their documentation together. Take your pictures, do all your uploading, answer your reflective questions. And it takes a good 20 minutes a day to do that.
Wow, okay. And some of the other comments are that people really like seeing these portfolios. They really do have some depth to them that is pretty impressive, actually. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone have a question?
And I will tell you, like the personal project portfolios, that's after I've taught them for a whole entire year. So that's not where they started. They started with the paper tower, and and that's where I try to get them to. Mm-hmm. So, and the guy with the robot hand, he used a lot of his pictures and stuff, and he made him a thing, and he took it to Maker Faire. And so if he didn't have that documentation, it would have been really hard to show his process at Maker Faire. So that was really good.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate this, Teresa. This has been great. For everyone who's attending, thanks for coming. I just launched a poll which only has 4 questions. If you could take the next minute that we have on our schedule and answer those polling questions, that would be awesome.
And I also put my email in the chat box if anybody wants to email me.
Yes,
I'll be glad to share.